Ooh, another white boy with a podcast. Pronouns, Jim Bro. Another white boy with a podcast. You want to see the video? It went viral.
Hi Gains Gurus and welcome to TMGP, the Muscle Growth Podcast, episode 39. I am your host, Roscoe, and today we're welcoming Charly Jeoung onto the show. Charly is a standout figure in the strength sports community, making his mark as an elite powerlifter turned NPC super heavyweight bodybuilder and co-founder of Team Full ROM. With a decade-long background in powerlifting, boasting a best total of 1,925 pounds at 245 pounds, Charly's journey took a pivotal turn after repeated injuries led him to seek new challenges in bodybuilding. His transition was marked not just by a shift in training focus from pure strength to hypertrophy and aesthetics, but also by an impressive competitive debut. In May 2021, Charly won the overall at his first bodybuilding show, immediately qualifying for the national stage. Later that year, he made a splash at NPC Nationals, earning a spot in the highly competitive first call-outs and finishing top 10, a remarkable achievement for a newcomer. Charly is recognized for his analytical approach to training, emphasizing individualized technique and mind-muscle connection, and for his relentless drive to improve, particularly in building his back and overall stage presence. As he continues to develop as a bodybuilder, Charly's story stands out for his ability to blend the discipline of powerlifting with the artistry of bodybuilding, inspiring both lifters and fans across the fitness world. In this episode, we dive into the importance of critical thinking in the fitness space, the risks of blindly following trending sports science, and why grounding your training in evidence and reason is more vital than ever. In today's episode, we dive into a wide range of insights. Some of the topics include why sports science research does not hold up like in other scientific fields, the importance of anecdotal evidence, the origins of the name Charly Banks for his Instagram handle, Charly's transition from powerlifting to bodybuilding, sustainable training, how to break through plateaus, doing what you can and what works for you, how many athletes and powerlifters and bodybuilders have regular lives and regular jobs too, and it's purely just a hobby. More muscle equating to more strength for most people, the gym not being the same as therapy, PEDs in professional bodybuilding, harm reduction practices, top training principles like volume versus intensity, the optimal training fast, especially with influencers, and so much more. Get ready for a truly informative episode. Quick shameless self-plug. I am uploading more consistently on Reps with Roscoe on YouTube, so check that out for some epic fitness edutainment content. A little disclaimer. This show does not contain medical advice. The views and opinions expressed by guests on the Muscle Growth Podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect my beliefs or the stance of the podcast. While we aim to provide valuable insights and information, it's important to approach all topics with critical thinking. I encourage you to do your own research, consider multiple perspectives, and form your own conclusions. Healthy discussion is always welcome, and I'm happy to engage with listeners in the YouTube comment section to continue the conversation. Lastly, don't forget to follow us on all major social media platforms, including Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and X. Find us at the Muscle Growth Podcast and myself at Reps with Roscoe. Welcome, Charly, to the Muscle Growth Podcast, where we explore subjects related to muscle science and hypertrophy. I'm thrilled to have you join us for today's conversation. Can you briefly introduce yourself and your journey into the world of bodybuilding?
Yeah, sure. First off, thank you for having me on the podcast, Roscoe. My name is Charly Jeoung. I am an IFBB pro. I used to compete in powerlifting, I would say 6-7 years ago, and then I made a transition over to bodybuilding, I would say roughly around 5-6 years ago, and I've been working towards that goal ever since. And recently, in the last, it was last summer, 2024, I turned pro in the open, and at the moment, I am just working my way towards growing a bit more before even thinking about stepping on stage again. And beyond that, I am an online coach to help others, with their goals, whether that be bodybuilding related, general health, just want to get jacked, anything in that realm. And hopefully we'll have a awesome conversation here today, and hopefully your viewership gains some insight from whatever I have to say.
I'm very excited for it. Thank you very much for your time and effort. I was wondering, what spurred that transition from powerlifting to bodybuilding?
Oh, quite simply, I was running into recurring little nags and niggles in my joints, specifically my shoulders and biceps, during my approach to competitions. So during like the last 2 months or so, it'd be the same exact spot right here on my biceps due to squatting low bar and just not being mobile, put so much stress on that when I got to bench press, my arms would just give out from the pain. So that kept happening, and even with all the mobility work and little changes in my technique, it would still recur. So I decided to take a little break to just hopefully let that heal up, work on mobility, just build up muscle in hopes to get back to powerlifting. But the mobility part never really panned out. I think I'm just too wound up. But more importantly, I fell in love with like the process of bodybuilding. The training was really, really fun. I enjoyed the all-encompassing aspect of the kind of process of it, because it wasn't just training. Powerlifting shouldn't be just training, by the way, but a lot of powerlifters take it that way, like I did. But bodybuilding, you have to be so much more on top of like your activity, your diet, routine, sleep, things like that. And I guess that just clicked with me. I've always been someone who enjoyed routine, who thrived in routine, and I think once I started, going towards that route, I just fell in love with it, and I just kind of never looked back.
That takes us really nicely into a question about sustainable training. So you mentioned that you were having injuries and things. How have you now adapted your approach for bodybuilding to be more sustainable? And taking a step back, for people that are powerlifting, how can they maybe try and make it more sustainable for them? You mentioned the mobility work. What else?
Yeah. So let me, I guess, approach this from my personal experience first, and then I can kind of expand on other parts to hopefully help others in similar positions. So for me, I think I got there a bit too late to the whole working on mobility. I never did that throughout powerlifting. I just kind of got stronger and stronger and stronger. And by the time I needed it, again, it was too late. I was already I already squatted 800 pounds in competition, and I've totaled like over 1900. So it's got to a point where, oh man, it might be, I might be pushing the limits of like what I can do here. I tried and it didn't work, which is fine. Once again, I kind of fell in love with bodybuilding, so it kind of worked out in the end anyway. But for me, what has changed a lot in bodybuilding is that luckily I don't have to focus on specific exercises or movements. Powerlifting, you're kind of, locked into those three, right? You have to do those. That said, I'll get into, what can help others in a second, but I had to do those things, especially towards the end of a meet prep, right? Because if I'm not practicing those movements, I'm not going to be proficient in those movements when I get to them. But, once again, I was at a point where no matter how short of a period I was doing them, as soon as I did one heavy session of low bar, straight bar squats, my arms would be like 90% fucked already. I got that bad. But now in bodybuilding, I don't have to worry about having specific movements, and I can pick movements based on what feels good. So I'm not bound to anything, and I can always adapt. If I have little aches and pains, which, we all do. Now for, I guess, people in powerlifting now, what I highly suggest, if they aren't doing so already, is try to maintain the amount of mobility they already have. They don't have to increase it, but I think doing some work here and there to make sure they're maintaining what they have is crucial, especially if they don't want to end up like me. And that can be as simple as just simply doing some stretches at the end of your workout. Yeah, simple as that, to be quite honest. And another part there is something that can help with their recurring little nags is to just focus more on non-powerlifting specific movements for a vast majority of their training. I think that's one mistake that I did during my career, is that I focused way too much on deadlifts, straight bar squats, and barbell bench pressing. When in reality, I could have probably just focused on those things. The last 2 months out from a competition, for beginners, you probably can throw them in more, but the more advanced you are, and the more skill you've acquired in those movements, it doesn't take long for you to become proficient at them again. So I think even for super advanced powerlifters, even a month of using those specific movements is plenty to maximize your proficiency at those movements. And as you're leading up to those, using those specific movements, you can use very like light movements, right? Like a buffalo bar squat or a buffalo bar bench. Some little variations so you're not taxing that same movement pattern and possibly wearing down on those the joints when you actually need them during a peak for a prep. And before that, you can just work on machines, cables, things like that too. At the end of the day, muscle is going to move load, right? The more muscle you have, the stronger you're going to be. Not that you're going to be the strongest while building that muscle. Obviously, you're going to be strongest when you potentiate all that muscle that you've accrued and be proficient in those movement patterns. But your job as a powerlifter isn't to be strong all the time; it's to be strong on the platform. So I think taking the time to build the muscle so that you are your strongest, or have the potential to be your strongest in the long term, is what you should be focusing on.
That makes a lot of sense. Is the buffalo bar a cambered bar?
Yeah, it's the one that's curved.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And on that note, you mentioned maybe not doing straight bar deadlift, straight bar bench, and squat. Would you maybe vary that out with a Zercher squat or something, or and like you said, the cambered bar for the bench, or maybe something else that's still that movement or that pattern?
So I think that is a fantastic way to go about things. I do think context matters a lot here too. How advanced the lifter is, where in the phase of training they are, how close to your competition they are. That's all going to factor into what movements at what frequency they choose to use. Like I said, the more beginner you are, likely you can keep a lot of those same movement patterns in, and similar ones like front squats or shoulder squats, things like that. And as you become more advanced, depending once again on the phase of your training, obviously if you're right 3 weeks out from training, you probably want to work with more specific movement patterns. But who's to say that you couldn't work Zercher squats in or front squats in, let's say 3 months out, and then start tapering in more straight bar movements here and there. And then, as you approach your competition, when you're 3-4 weeks out, you probably want to focus, solely on those movement patterns.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And how would you break through plateaus? You mentioned about progressing easily, and I think that's maybe for the beginners, but how do you get through the plateaus? When you get stuck on a bench on a certain number, same with a squat, deadlift, what is your favorite way to kind of break through? And then what's the way that's worked the best for you or other powerlifters?
I know people are going to hate this answer because it's so simple, but change small variables. It's not a magic potion or magic bullet. It's not one magic thing in your training that you need to change to, now break through the plateau. I think you just have to make incremental changes in your approach, and that's how you make those incremental, gains in your progress. It could be as small as, are you sleeping 7.5 hours per night? Try 8 hours. right? That's for me. That's like one of the bigger things people do, but people don't realize, especially as powerlifters. I think bodybuilders are more in tune with that. Although I think more bodybuilders could do better on that end too. But sleep is a huge factor in how you're going to not only recover from your training, but be sharper. Probably have better output in your training too. Um, Another thing too is gain weight. Once again, I'm not saying go on a dreamer bulk, which we see a lot of powerlifters do, right? They just like I see this thing with powerlifters where as soon as they decide they're like, okay, I'm going into the next weight class, they just like eat everything in the world and like try to reach that next upper limit of that weight class as soon as possible, which is just asinine. But make small incremental changes in your diet, right? More muscle is going to move more load in the long run. So work on that, work on sleep, whatever helps you recover, reduce stress, change little variables in your training. If you've reached a plateau with your current plan, do you need more volume? Do you need less frequency? Do you need more frequency? Change small variables based on hopefully metrics they are tracking in their progress. What feels more sore, what feels more beat up, what feels not as beat up during training. Are you recovering in time? Do you recover? Do you feel fresh the day after a night of sleep? If not, increase your sleep once again. How's your body weight doing? Is it holding? Is it going up? Is it going down? So once again, I know powerlifters are listening to this and they're going like, I'm not going to do all that, or I don't do that, right? Like that's a bodybuilder thing. I promise you, it shouldn't be. Like I've said this in the past. I think bodybuilders and powerlifters should be doing most of the things exactly the same. There's not much. Yeah, like most of their plans should be the same. The only time it changes really is when powerlifters start working towards a meet and they need to start potentiating that strength on those 3 specific movements. And that's pretty much it. Like if you want to be the best powerlifter in the world, you should be doing things like a bodybuilder.
It's an interesting take, and I think I definitely agree with it for the most part. But interestingly enough, I had a world record powerlifter on the show before, and they said that they eat whatever their kids eat. They don't have a diet. They don't have anything like that. They just eat whatever their kids are eating. And I was blown away by that. I was like, that's crazy.
Okay.
They just eat the same, just more. And I said, that's wild. That's a world record holder, bench presser.
You know what? That's fine too. Because what you can actually adapt to in the real world is going to matter more. Like, we're speaking in terms of like
when you get stuck.
What is the best thing in, or even like what I'm really saying is what is the best thing you can do in ideal situations, right? If everything's perfect, what we can move. But here's the thing, most people who do powerlifting and bodybuilding, we have jobs. Like we're not like professional powerlifters or professional bodybuilders. Even though I'm an IFBB pro, that doesn't mean anything. I work a normal job. I have family life. I have friends. So like whatever you can actually make work is going to be the thing that sustains you best throughout the long run.
That makes perfect sense. And I think a lot of people don't realize what you just mentioned there about a lot of professional bodybuilders, athletes having other jobs or the main jobs. And then the bodybuilding or the powerlifting is just on the side for fun. Not everyone, some of them do it full time. They're lucky, I guess, or not.
Yeah, very lucky. Yeah, that's I could name like maybe like probably a small handful that actually does it full time.
So, is your full-time job Ascend?
Yes, okay. It's an online coach full time.
Okay, amazing. And is it mostly general pop or powerlifters, bodybuilders?
I would say, if I do off the top of my head, 60 to 70% are gen pop, but want to look the best they can. Pretty much putting, I would say, as much or almost as much effort into building the physique as I would say most amateur bodybuilders. A lot of them do better than most amateur bodybuilders that I've talked to. I would say about 20% are in that boat, but either currently compete or want to compete soon. And I would say about 10% are non-physique based or non-physique focused athletes who are into, other sports like powerlifting, strong man, strong woman. I have a Highlands game athlete, rugby, just mix. Like one guy does marathons, a few guys just do marathons and ultra marathons and work towards building physique. So kind of like a mixed bag, but mostly physique based.
But that's so cool that you have such a wide range of athletes. So congrats for that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, they're really fun to work with.
Who's your favorite? No, I'm kidding. You mentioned something that I totally agree with earlier, is that the more muscle you have, it does directly correlate to your strength. And I know that shouldn't be controversial, but apparently I've had arguments with people. They say that getting more muscle doesn't equate to more strength. And I agree, it doesn't always, because you do get really jacked bodybuilders that are not that strong. And then you get some more skinny guys that are very strong. But I think in general, the more muscle you have, the more strength that you will be able to have as well. Like there will definitely be a limit. Like the 150-pound man will not be able to deadlift 500 kilograms. It's just not happening.
And here's the thing. I think that that statement that we make could be made less controversial if we put in a little caveat and say the same person will be stronger with more muscle.
Yes. But I mean, that's obvious.
I will say always.
Yeah. But that's obvious. And that's
obvious.
Like, like you said, like, yes, we have to add the caveat. Otherwise people get upset. And I understand, but it's that's what we mean.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, social media is in a way where if you say something, someone's always going to pick that small exception and argue with you about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's like, but it's social media. It's shorts. They're called shorts because people have short attention spans. You can't give all the details in a short or a little clip.
You cannot.
And if you want to argue, then I guess you can. But like, it's unnecessary. I think like there's bigger issues to argue about than if you had more muscle, would you be stronger? Because you probably would.
Yeah.
But anyway, speaking of incredible feats, did you see what happened this weekend?
I saw one extremely impressive powerlifter in the 275, I think, pound weight class. Total something insane, like close to 2,700 raw with the wraps.
Yeah.
26 something, right?
Yeah. South African, Colton Engelbrecht, 1,200 kilograms.
Yeah. I saw that. I immediately thought, like, yep, that's a record that's going to stand probably forever. I saw a clip. I think he squatted I knew he squatted over 1,000. He deadlifted over 1,000, and he benched like close to 6 and like 530, 573 or something like that, and it looked like a second attempt.
So it was a 1,200 kilogram total, which is the first total that big ever in the history of powerlifting. It was a 470 kilogram squat, 260 bench kilograms, 470 deadlift, which gave him the biggest total ever in the history of the world in powerlifting. Pretty sure they weren't doing that back in the day.
No.
Highest recorded one, at least. He almost locked out 500. It was right at the top. It was right there. And I think his CNS was just like, bro, you've done a lot today. You need to stop. Charlie and I talked briefly about how truly incredible Colton's achievement is, and then went on to talk about why sports science does not hold up to a standard in a similar fashion to other more established sciences. Unfortunately, the recording for this segment was lost due to technical difficulties, but Charlie mentioned 3 main factors, including tiny sample sizes, poor control variables, and low quality assessment criteria, and result bias. We apologize for the inconvenience caused. Please enjoy the rest of the episode with Charlie.
Already, like, this can't quite possibly take into account enough variables for the whole population for it to be adapted into anything usable for the population. There's just not enough people in the sample size. And also, a lot of these studies don't control for variables that I think most people would argue that are very important to hypertrophy, like sleep, stress management, nutrition is a huge one. Those things alone, I mean, there's probably more that I dive into, but those things just like stand out already off the bat. Like, I don't need much more convincing that these studies just aren't worthwhile for me, at the very least, someone in my position, to mind in any sort of manner besides entertainment.
So you mentioned there for why most sports science research does not hold up like in other scientific fields. You mentioned the tiny sample sizes. You mentioned the poor control variables like the sleep. And then also, I think you've also mentioned before the results and the assessment, including bias, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you mind just touching a bit more on the bias and that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't want to name names because then people grab their pitchforks and raise a riot online. But if anyone is interested, they could probably just do a quick research, but not actual research, Google search on it, and just see who's involved in these studies and who runs them and what their, I guess, biases already, where they are. Once again, I'm not naming names, but one of them has come out in other areas and openly said that they are biased towards high volume training, so that when these researchers have these biases already and then run these studies, and then the actual assessment is done by either them or people they handpick, and they're not blinded on top of that, man, it becomes really murky in terms of, like, once again, I'm not straight up calling these people liars, but more so like, I think a reasonable conclusion could be that, like, are they skewing results based off their biases? I think that's an honest question to ask, like, without pointing fingers, right? Because it is the reality of things, and that's why in a lot of other research, the assessments or assessors are blinded. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
It's very weird. Do you think maybe it's to do with underfunding?
I think a huge part of it is underfunding.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
that makes sense.
I think the majority of the problems that sports science research related to hypertrophy deals with is via underfunding, and they're trying to make it work with the resources they have. But I also want to say that is not a reason to be like, oh, we should just go with that because that's the best we have.
Yeah. And to be so dogmatic about it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think using it and then using the results combined with anecdotal experience and seeing where things line up is helpful for people. But to completely discount the latter and just rely on the research in this area, I think that's where the problem lies.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And then that takes us nicely into the next question, which is the importance of anecdotal evidence.
In our area,
Yes.
I think it's extremely important because people have been building muscle for a long time. We cannot deny that, right? And arguably, people who have been helping others do it for a long time consistently, I'd say, like, if you look at that from a pure just sample size perspective, it's a far larger sample size than every single person you can combine in every single hypertrophy related study done, like all the participants in that. I'm not saying, and that's not to say that you should solely trust anecdotal evidence, because I think who gives it, what kind of data they track to compare against their results matter. So again, don't take this as you should trust whatever other one says, even though they've had good results. Like, how did they achieve those results? Where's the proof? Where's the data? And then from there, maybe that person is someone to take their experience and anecdotal evidence into account in how you approach your own training and nutrition and just your progress towards growing more muscle.
That makes perfect sense. I like what you mentioned there about people have been growing muscle for a long time, but the area of sports science is only a few decades old, if that's not very, it's not very old.
Yeah.
It's not a well-established science, I guess. Quite a fun question here. Where does Banks come from in your handle on Instagram?
Oh, that's quite simple. So I'm from Philadelphia, born and raised. A part of my brain wants me to finish that song, and you'll see where I'm getting at. So for people in my age group, they might know the show called Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Will Smith in that show, he was born and raised in West Philadelphia. And one of the main characters in that show, his name was Carlton Banks. So quite simply, that's where my handle comes from, Charlton Banks. My name is actually not Charlton, nor Banks. It is just a play on that character's name.
That's hysterical. And then you've mentioned before that the gym is not therapy. What do you mean by that? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so what I meant by that, I made a post regarding that, and so a lot of people agreed. A few people took up in arms. What I meant by that post, gym is not therapy, is we see a lot of people online like have that mindset that we've heard it straight up. They say gym is my therapy, or gym is my place of healing, or I go into the gym to fight my demons, etc. Right? And a lot of, I think, people misconstrue avoiding their stressors and issues with therapy because it makes them feel good because they don't have to worry about it, which is that part's true, but it's not therapy. Therapy is actually tackling your stressors and issues and traumas. I'm not saying that the gym can't be a part of your therapy, right? Because lowering short-term stressors so that possibly you could have a clearer mind to think on the issues at hand, I think is a great tool. But I think a lot of people approach the gym as being their therapy. Like, that is the only thing they're doing for their mental health. And to those people, I say, it is not therapy. It cannot be. You are not addressing your traumas or your stressors or your issues. You are masking them with avoidance. So, yeah.
That makes sense. And I like the way that you mentioned that you could definitely use it as part of your therapy. Just don't make it your whole personality about the therapy. And if you do need therapy, then that's fine. Yep. Go see a therapist. And maybe the people that were up in arms with you about it, I think maybe they forgot to go see the therapist, and that's why they were up in arms with you about it.
Possibly, yeah. It's strange. There is a very small minority that actually got, I don't know, maybe upset is the word, about me saying that the gym can't be their therapy, because they said that some of them said therapy doesn't work. Especially one guy in particular said therapy doesn't work for men. I think therapy works for everyone. Yeah, that was quite strange. I just want to kind of make this note to anyone listening that might be hesitant or has been hesitant about therapy or think it's not for everyone. I'm going to sit here, and I usually don't make dogmatic statements, but I'm very comfortable with this one because it's something I truly believe in. I think everyone can benefit from therapy in one form or another. I'm not saying every therapist can help you, because you have to find the right match. But once you do, I think everyone can benefit in one degree or another, some more than others, but everyone can benefit from it. It shouldn't be like this thing where it's like, you're going to therapy, so you're broken. It's not that. I think everyone needs help in that department to maybe get to your center or to excel. So, yeah.
That makes perfect sense, and I agree. I think there's no shortage of people that could benefit from therapy, myself included. It's just very expensive, but good thing we'll have AI to do it soon, hopefully. Can we talk about PEDs in the context of harm reduction? Obviously, with social media being as big as it is, and teenagers and stuff going onto PEDs, we're not trying to promote it, but from a harm reduction side of things, can you talk about it in general in terms of at a professional level, what kind of PEDs are used, what kind of dosages, and then maybe on a more personal level, what you see in competitions and from your peers and from yourself?
Okay, so I guess the first part, let me just repeat so I answer it correctly. PED usage at the professional level? Is that the question? Like, what is that? What does that look like? And what are people doing for harm reduction at the professional level? Or what they should be doing?
Both, however you want to phrase it. Those are both important.
Okay, so the first part, what dosages should people be using at the professional level? That's all going to be context based, and everyone's going to look different, and I'll kind of get into that in a bit. But the answer is there is no dose, there's no range, there's no number. It depends on how the person responds to that dose, exactly, and
to that compound,
exactly,
and
duration, compounds,
and duration,
yeah. And what people should be doing at the professional level, to be quite frank, at all levels of PD use, at minimum, they should be checking their blood pressure weekly, right? They should be getting regular lab work. And if you want to put on that extra layer of insurance, which, again, in my opinion, it's something that should be a no-brainer, is get periodic echocardiograms and calcium score tests. And I think if you do those things, you have most of your bases covered in terms of the alarms that are going off and what you should be tracking to then hopefully have mitigation protocols to implement so that you are not suffering from those issues.
Yep.
So then, next question is, what do I see? What do I see in professional bodybuilding, like usage of PEDs? I see such a wide range, and I know that a lot of people listening to this are going to get mad at what I'm about to say, because everyone thinks, not everyone, I'm not talking about everyone, but there's a strong majority of people that think pro bodybuilders are the way they are because all the gear they take. That is true sometimes, but sometimes it is not. Again, depends how someone responds to the drugs, the duration, the compounds, the dose. I have seen some pros, and this is something that's going to resonate with a lot of people, where their top milligram per week dose can go easily over 3 grams, 4 grams, right? We've seen that. We've heard the stories, right? 3 grams, I wouldn't even say that's excessive, right? Over 3 grams, possibly like 4 grams. I've seen, and this next part is going to be the part that a lot of people are like that can't be possible. I know pros, and not just regular pros, Olympians, the most they've taken is 1.5 grams of gear per week. And sometimes during the year, they are on TRT. I'm not, and when I say TRT, I don't mean like 400 milligrams of test per week. I'm talking like 125 milligrams of test per week. Like pretty much in that range of true TRT. And a lot of people are going to listen to that and go like, that's not possible because, they have egos. It's fine. Like, they're only better than me because of drugs. No, it's drugs, but they're also better than you because they're genetically better than you, which is fine, right? That they're genetically prone to grow more muscle and respond to those drugs in that manner. And I guess that's the long answer of it depends again. There's a giant range of drug use in professional bodybuilding, and the way you respond to it's going to be the factor of how much you take or decide to take and how you respond to it. And what harm reduction practices do I see in pro bodybuilding? It's all over the place. I know people who do all the smart things, check their blood pressure, get lab work done at the right times. Some even get their echo and calcium score tests done. And I know bodybuilders who I've asked what their blood pressure is usually running, and they have no fucking idea. Like, that is the most basic, simple thing you could do. No one has an excuse not to check their blood pressure. And I'm talking about normal people too. Like, the standard person should be checking their blood pressure regularly, right? Like, you have no excuse. It's $30 on Amazon. It takes quite literally 30 seconds to do, and it is a huge factor in your health. So, yeah, I've seen it all over across the board, man. It's some of it's awesome to see, and some of it's quite alarming and sad.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
So, obviously, all these compounds can have negative side effects, and I don't want to brush over those, but is there something that you would say some compounds are generally considered safer and better tolerated, in your opinion, and that are maybe safer versus ones that are more dangerous that you don't think there's any reason anyone should ever go on them?
Are we talking about PEDs as a whole or just anabolics right now?
Sure, PEDs as a whole, but I'm thinking along the lines of maybe testosterone is well tolerated for most people, safer than something like tren, for example.
Got it. So anabolics then first.
Yeah.
Okay. Anabolics. Usually, what I see is, once again, I'm talking in very broad strokes and generalities with people I've spoken with, but also worked with for years. People tend to tolerate a base dose of testosterone pretty well. If you don't, that's already kind of alarming sign already that maybe you're not cut out for it. But then on top of that, I would say the compounds I've seen that, again, most people tolerate pretty well are primobolan, masteron, anavar, NPP, EQ to a good degree, but I would say those pretty much covers a lot of drugs, right? And I think the standout thing here is kind of, you mentioned, what are some anabolics that I see a higher propensity for unwanted side effects are things like tren, right? Trustolone, DECA, although DECA and, NPP, someone could be like, oh, it's just the same compound, right? I think the duration at which DECA is in your system, especially if things go awry, is not worth it unless, you respond to it very well and that to use. I'd rather use NPP in that situation, but I'm getting the weeds now. More so, yeah, just kind of simply put, tren. Most orals, I know I named anavar, but I do find anavar quite mild, especially on the liver also. It has a larger impact on lipids than I would like. But I think people do over worry about the impact of orals on the liver. Obviously things like Halo are probably more liver toxic, but no one's using Halo at a lengthy, course. At least I hope not. Yeah.
Only powerlifters on meat day.
Yeah. But in terms of overall PEDs, I'd say things that for the general, once again, I'm talking about a general user, right? Not someone that knows how to use safely or properly or working with a coach, but the general user probably want to stay away from things like GNP, right? GNP is one of the things where it's extremely effective for what it does, but it's probably the one thing, or I'd say two things, but probably the one thing that you will die if you use it incorrectly. you will die 100%. You can take a dose where you are now, you'll not come back from, unfortunately.
Yeah. It was found in dynamite, I believe.
Yeah. It's,
that's where it
if you
comes
have
from.
it, if you and fertilizer, I believe if you try to go through like TSA, like airports with it, it goes off as an explosive.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
That's
which is why I don't travel with it. Yeah.
Oh, so you've taken?
Yeah. Once again,
okay.
I'm talking about general people should probably stay away from it.
Okay.
But if used properly in the right context and
very
needs,
good,
it is extremely effective for what it does and what you need for it to do.
Yeah. So it raises the body's temperature in a similar way to Clen, right? Or was that completely wrong?
Not completely wrong.
Okay.
So once again, I could have probably someone else explain this much better than I can. But what it does, once again, I'm not going to talk from the actual what it does at a cellular level, but what it does, it makes your cells more inefficient, or your mitochondria more inefficient at, I believe, creating energy, so that there's like a certain percentage that is a byproduct and this releases heat. That's why your body temperature rises. So Clen, your body temperature might rise because it elevates your heart rate. But DMP doesn't work in that mechanism. It actually makes you more inefficient.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a hectic one. That's why you don't recommend it for 99.9% of people, probably.
Yeah, because if you take too much,
you can die.
You can't reverse out of it. Like Clen, you just stop taking it, right? If you take way too much, you might. Obviously, if you take a really, really big dose, you might go into the hospital, and I don't know what they can do at that point. You're gonna. But with DMP, there's nothing you can do after a certain dose. If you build up too much of a dose in your system, I think they can try to like put you in an ice bath or something to raise your core. Lower your core temperature. But beyond that, like you either make it or you don't. You ride it out or you don't.
Mm. I heard about a disaster where a professional IFBB pro took 50 units of insulin by mistake.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say. When I said the one out of two, that's the second one. Like short-acting insulin can be the other thing to get people in trouble.
Okay. So is there a long-acting one that's...
Yes, 100%. So for most people, I don't think I'm not saying short-acting insulin, there's not a need for or a place for it. More so, I think people over-leverage it. Nowadays, you can just take something like Lantus. That's really long-acting insulin. You get in far less trouble with that. That's the one I suggest most people use if they're using insulin in their overall course. That's what I prefer. That's what most of my clients who are enhanced, I recommend. Once again, not to say that short-acting insulin isn't beneficial. I think, pre and post workout, it can have its benefits, but overall, I like long form insulin because of its efficacy, but also it's just way less. The risk factor goes down so much. Like, you really have to try to go hypo on Lantus. Like, you have to actively starve yourself for 6 hours and do activity if you want for that to happen.
So you mentioned Lantus and DNP. What else do you have in your protocol, and how is it different, a bulking protocol versus a cutting versus, is there a main gaining for you, or do you always do bulk and cut?
Let me tackle those in parts. So DNP and Lantus are things I've used. I don't keep them in. Like DNP, I've used, in my whole career, a total of, I would say 8 weeks, maybe 10 weeks total. Like, not at once, obviously, just cumulative. It's not something I've used quite often. It's just, once again, as the needs arise. Lantus is something I regularly use when I am trying to gain weight. So the second question was, what differences do I in my protocol do I have when I'm trying to gain weight or lose weight? So first off, the anabolic side of things, to be honest, not much changes. The only thing that might change a little bit is I might skew a bit more towards compounds that help with my joints and help with a bit more water retention during a deficit, to once again protect my joints a bit more, and just to feel a bit fuller, like artificially still, but still it makes, it's nice to feel full. It's nice to get pumps. Growth hormone stays in year round, at different doses, obviously. Lantus and insulin is something I rarely use during a deficit. I mostly only use it during a gaining phase, and during a deficit, once again, as needed. I think you should approach all drugs as needed, not like, what am I doing, and if I'm cutting, do I always put in stimulants? No, it's once again, like, what's the timeline, what's the trajectory, where do you need things to be in, what are the needs? So things I've used, things like DNP, Clen, during a deficit. Some other thing I also keep in mostly year round is T3 and T4 to pretty much maintain my T3 and T4 in pretty much make sure my metabolism is where I want it to be. Usually with decreasing food for a prolonged time, your thyroid production goes down, and when you're gaining weight, your thyroid production has trouble, for some people, maintaining its output for the level of size you have, so you start feeling a little sluggish. So as a professional bodybuilder, I just kind of use the dose to replace what I want, in my system. What else was I say? And obviously, this isn't like I'm gaining, this is in, I'm losing, this is in, once again. And just kind of for the audience, it's not just always use. I have bridge phases between my courses to assess health, regain, health, metrics at least, in terms of like blood pressure or lab work or whatever I'm looking at that point. Also, just kind of, take the load off. I think just people always want to go, and don't realize how much stress it puts on the body. Did I answer most of your questions there?
Yeah, exactly. What's the most testosterone you've ever done?
The most testosterone I've ever done was early on in my career. I got up to 500, I want to say. 500 milligrams. So if 500 milligrams per week of testosterone is the most I've taken. That's not total load, just testosterone.
That's not a lot, just for the audience, just by the way. I think most professional bodybuilders would be 5 times that, probably.
No, I would say no. No.
Or a lot, not most, sorry.
Yeah,
Some.
Most professional bodybuilders,
Not.
I haven't seen do 2.5 grams of testosterone. No, I'd say that's quite high. Yeah.
Oh. Did you see? Derek from More Plates, More Dates would disagree, but you're actually a pro, so he doesn't know.
I would actually disagree with Derek on a lot.
Yeah,
so here's the thing. I know who he is.
Yeah.
I listen to some of his stuff. Some of his stuff I like, but some of his stuff I'm just like, I don't know where he's getting that from. Quite confusing. I would love to chat with him one day, but
we should.
2.5 grams of testosterone per week is
a lot.
I've heard it, but that's a lot. I don't. It's a ton.
Do you know Vigorous Steve?
I do. I don't. I'm not a.
You're not a fan. Okay.
Once again, I think so. Here's the thing. I don't think a lot of what he says is bad. I just think that there's not a context for users. So it's not wrong, because I can make situations where it's like, oh, that makes sense. But if you just take it a broad stroke to everything like that, I think it's tough for people to decipher what they should do, what they shouldn't do, what's safe, what's not, what's effective, what's not. But back to the 2.5 grams of testosterone, I've rarely.
You don't see that. Yeah.
Never. No, almost never. It's maybe, I don't know. My question for you is, do you mean 2.5 grams of gear per week, like total compounds, milligrams? Yes, 100%. I've taken almost that much. Per week. Yeah. But 2.5 grams of testosterone, I no. That's I'll die on that hill. Like almost no one does that much testosterone per week. Yeah. And if they do take 2.5 grams of testosterone per week, I would say there are large gaps, very low hanging fruit that they can go after to optimize what they're doing on the anabolic side of things. Usually at that dose, for most people, once again, I'm talking about, we're always speaking in generalities. For most people at that dose, they're going to run into a level of unwanted side effects that they could mitigate a lot of that if they were to use different compounds versus just testosterone.
That makes sense.
Because testosterone is great. It does what it needs to do, but it also comes with a host of unwanted side effects that most people, after I would say after like 400 milligrams, like when I've seen, like they start suffering from those unwanted side effects, which once again could be easily mitigated with changing up their total milligrams per week, exactly with different compounds. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Side effects.
Yeah. I think a lot of people confuse more testosterone as more gains when that's not the case. Like Primbalin doesn't increase your testosterone, but it increases. We're not looking for that. We're looking for your total ability to
Anabolic
create
load.
muscle, anabolism. Exactly, that's what we're looking for, not testosterone.
No, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I think those 2.5 grams were the guys trying to push 20,000 nanograms per deciliter. Like those guys. Don't recommend that. What's one training principle most people overlook but has made a massive difference in your own journey?
One training principle. You know what? I'm going to speak on this as it relates to my journey. Because I've seen the pendulum swing this way towards in the last, like, I would say 5-ish years. I think the pendulum swings back and forth over the course of decades in this field. What I say now is not going to be true maybe a couple of years from now, but intensity. I think that's something recently people are missing out on or forgetting that is a super important variable in your progress, intensity or effort, however you want to call it. There's been this huge shift in the past 5 years of, what your technique and create, like, what is the perfect way to do a row? Like, if your elbow is off like a few degrees, it's going to target more upper back, all that stuff, and also range of motion and volume. Those things are important, but you can't look at things in a vacuum. Like, intensity is, you can do all those things, but if you're training like 8 reps from failure on everything, like, you're missing the whole fucking point. So for me right now, I'm going to say intensity, because over the years I've swung all ways, right? I started my career off training very intensely. I started controlling that a bit more. I made a lot of good progress with really high intensity, but, somewhat moderation. And then I got in points, where I tried the super high volume, more hyper focusing on my range of motion, hyper focusing on my technique. And while it, like, in my head, I'm like, oh man, like, I'm doing everything right, because, like, that's what everyone's telling me, right? I made the worst progress in those periods because I was overemphasizing volume. And when you do that, you tire yourself out. And because of that, you don't train intensely enough. And when you're focusing on technique and range of motion all the time, in terms of that's all your mental energy is going towards, you're probably lacking a bit on intensity also. If your technique breaks down like 5% during an exercise, like, I've seen guys do that. And I'm not just saying that, like, I literally have, like, I'd say a lot of my clients come to me with that exact issue. They've fallen to the online advice of, if your technique breaks down a little bit, that's technical failure, right? Like, yeah, you can stand on that, on that point and it'd be like, that's true. It's like, yeah, but I would say technical failure is somewhere, it's a realm. It's not like, it's not an on-off binary switch, right? I think you can still be technically proficient or doing a movement technically well if you have a little bit of momentum or a little bit of deviation in your technique from rep 1. is that going to change depending on what movement you're doing? Of course, right? Like I'd have much more comfort in someone doing a curl with a little bit of upper body movement than someone performing a deadlift with a little bit of lower back flexion, right? Like that, I'd rather not have. But with a curl, like it's a single joint movement. I'm not so fucking worried about that, right? So I think people have gotten into that too much, worrying about that too much, because I've also got in that trap and forget completely about how hard they're actually training. They're worried about they're getting injured, or they're worried that they're not optimizing their value for the effort they're putting into training. But once again, you're not putting much effort in, so you're not getting much out of it at that point anyway. So I know that's kind of a rant on my end, but that's the long answer of I think people forget right now about training hard enough in your training. Yeah.
Intensity. No, I totally agree. I've realized I train intensely sometimes and then not intensely other times. And I've realized that my main issue is trying to get a certain number of reps where I say I'm going to get 8 and then I get 8. But if I actually didn't say 8, I could have gotten way more.
Yeah, that's a common thing.
I tricked my mind into only getting 8. So now I've stopped counting on some of that. I'm like, I told the videographer one time, I'm going for 4 reps because it's like really heavy for me. And he was videoing, so I had that extra strength. And I think I did 14 reps, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, it's just because I was showing off for camera.
So it's funny you say that, because this is how I train most of my clients in their actual training, is that, or this is the way I coach most of my clients in their training, is that our targets are reps and reserve related. They're effort related. I have rep ranges there, but then there's prescriptions on how you increase load based on how many reps you hit. So our target isn't the rep. Like I know some coaches, they program, I want to get this reps for the, et cetera, right? I think it's fine way to go about it. I think it's harder to do so. Because kind of your instance where you could have very much done more. Or on the flip side, if you had a really terrible night of sleep and all that stuff, like you might be stressing that way too much, right? Where the way I like to coach is, here is how many reps I want you to leave. And obviously that you need to work on the client with that and kind of make sure that you're on the same page of what effort is. But I think that's a better way to train. It's easy to track. You have a more linear approach to overall fatigue accumulation, etc.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And then finally, our last question, and once again, thank you for your patience today. Can we talk about how influencers did not get big doing optimal training, like 8-second ridiculous stretch things, for example? In general, maybe some did.
So I love this. I love this question. I think with the kind of surge of social media in the past decade, plus the whole, science-based influencer, lifter persona, like those two things combined, some people are capitalizing on that as their, I guess, persona online, which is fine. Once again, I have nothing against it. It's more so we have to look at things in context and be honest about the approach we're having towards training. For example, I've seen, there's a handful, I'm not going to name names, but there's a handful of guys online who are really, really big. They're very muscular, and they hyper emphasize, like I see their video where their stretch is like 4 or 5 seconds long. They pause for like a whole 2 seconds, and then they do their contraction. Everything looks perfect and beautiful. And like, once again, we don't know if they're actually training like that, first of all, right? That's just for the fucking clip. But second, like, dude, that person got big not training like that, right? And these guys look up to these bigger dudes and like, dude, they're doing it like this, so like it must be right? They're falling for the same trap of like, when the flip side where like someone like a bro online says like, oh, Ronnie Coleman did X, Y, and Z, he's big. It's the same thing, but the opposite way, right? Like, it's funny they don't see it when they say it. They're like, X, Y, and Z is big, and look how he does. It's like, he got big training probably like a fucking bro, which is fine. I think once again, if you're using pretty good technique, not lifting like you're possessed, putting the effort, like not like contorting your body to finish a fucking rep, I think you're doing most things correctly, right? As long as you're eating well, sleeping well, managing your stress, modulating your training volume and intensity in a way where you can recover from session to session, like that's like 99% of the shit, and everything else, like, it's minutia, right? Especially when your technique is decent. Like, you don't have to have this ultra specific like technique. If you look like a fucking robot, like rowing it X, Y, and Z, and it's like, oh man, once again, I'm not going to name names, but people can probably figure out who I'm talking about. They're really big names online. Like, once again, they're gigantic. They look amazing. Yeah. I love a lot of their physiques, but it's like they didn't get big.
I think I've heard of the one guy that you're chatting about, and I believe he gave his entire protocol that he's done, and I believe it was just TRT. He's never done anything else, and he's one of the biggest guys I've seen online. So well done to him. Yeah,
well done. Yeah, I don't believe that for a second. No. We chatted about this on the side.
We did.
I'm sorry, viewers, listeners, but you guys can probably you guys, if you're watching this podcast or listen to this podcast, you guys are smart enough to make the logic jumps here and know who we're talking about.
No, exactly. So we didn't say anything though. So finally, what advice or parting words of wisdom do you have for our listeners who are looking to embark on their own journey of muscle growth and bodybuilding?
I love this question. I'm going to give you the advice that I wish I took for myself a long time ago, and I would probably be much bigger now and as big as I was earlier in my career, and I hope you guys will take some of the advice to heart, is first and foremost, training is not everything. Your diet, sleep, and stress management, they're huge in your journey and how you progress. Don't think that steps equal cardio. They're different. Steps and NEAT, that's just you being a fucking human. Please do that. Cardio is for your cardiovascular health, so please do that also. The more efficient your body runs, the healthier you are, the better progress you're going to make. So in your nutrition, please eat mostly whole foods. If everything you eat comes out of a package, you're probably doing it wrong. If it fits your macros, it doesn't work in that sense. It works if you eat mostly whole foods and then throw a little treat here and there. That's fine, right? But eat color, eat veggies, eat fruits, whole foods. Big thing here, I've already mentioned in the podcast. Track your own metrics. Track your body weight. Track the way you sleep, the way you manage stress. Track how you feel session to session, because those things are going to be ultimately the things you need to track trends, to know what adjustments that you need to make to optimize your progress. I know a lot of people listen to this, people online get super anxious about what they need to change, and they're constantly shifting things in their program based on what other people are telling them, which it's fine to take this advice if you don't have any base at all and you need to figure things out. That's great. Like, you have something to at least work on and then improve from. But once you have that kind of base, stop changing your shit based on like what people say online. Even what I say, I want you to track your own like data and then make adjustments based on your data, because not everyone's going to respond the same way to the same information online. Like, if someone says like you need to be exactly this calorie deficit to make progress, or you need to gain at this rate or lose at this rate, that's the most optimal rate. Like, I think it's all horseshit. You need to make your adjustments based on how you're progressing, and not only just scale weight, like how's your other biofeedback, how's your stress, how's your sleep, how's your hunger, things like that. Like, these targets are meaningless if you are miserable and not performing at other parts of your life the way you want to. So sorry for the rant. I know that's not one thing that people should look out for if they want to improve their physique over the long run. But I truly believe that is the way to do it, if you actually care about this and want to optimize and maximize your progress, is to focus on the bread and butter and not focus on just what the next influencer says or what the next study says. Yeah, that's it.
That's a perfect response. So thank you so much. I don't think you went on a rant at all. In fact, I think you summarized the whole goal of the podcast, which is to enable people to get access to top professionals like yourself, where they give good advice, honest advice, and like you said, personalized micro adjustments based on your own metrics. I don't think it gets better than that. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure the listeners are going to have a blast listening to you.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a blast.
Thank you so much. Cheers, Charlie.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Muscle Growth Podcast. If you found value in today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating and a quick review. It helps us grow and reach more people just like you. Don't forget to follow us on all major social media platforms, including Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and X. Find us at the Muscle Growth Podcast and at Reps with Roscoe. For more insights, exclusive content, and full episodes, visit themusclegrowthpodcast.com. Your support truly makes a difference, so please like, share, comment, and follow. We're grateful for every bit of it. Until next time, keep pushing your limits and staying focused on getting bigger, stronger, and better.